Alright, so let's look through the WebinAR X software and let me show you exactly how easy it is to operate as a user, and then later on I'll make another video about how easy it is to operate as an actual viewer. So in effect, when you first log in, you see a dashboard which tells you how many webinars have been done, how many webinars are available, what's the list size like, and so on and so forth. Adding a webinar is actually very easy based on the menu on the left. To begin with, you can actually start through your subscribers. You can add people, you can create a list, you can add people to a list, and you can make sure that when you email a webinar notification, it only goes out to specific people that you choose are on a list. So let me add a KV customer list here. Alright, and within this list now, it's easy for me to start either manually adding people, or I can import them as well from an Excel sheet, from a CSV file, or I can actually configure it with a webinar, so when people sign up to a webinar, they're automatically imported into this list as well. Setting up webinars is also quite straightforward. We've actually looked at exactly how other webinar platforms work as well and tried to keep it very simple. If you already have a webinar, you can either clone a webinar, you can create a new one. Just enter a webinar title. In this case, I'm going to pick Neil Webinar X Demo. Perfect. Just put in some webinar description as well, and you can choose host, who the name of the person will be that actually presents the webinar. Then you can automatically sign up people to a particular subscriber list that you have already created. You can pick time zones, you can set durations of the webinar, you can set also start date. We're also going to add in recurring webinars in this, or webinars based on custom schedules. So if you wanted to run some training webinars, you could do that as well with WebinAR X. And again, it's very easy to operate. Then you can associate subscriber list, you can exclude some if you want, and then you can also add panelists who will then answer all the questions within the webinar itself. That's how easy it is to set up a new webinar. It just takes under a couple of minutes, if that. The next thing you want to do is make sure that your subscriber lists are up to date. Then add in the streaming sources. We recommend Hangouts. There are other private streaming sources as well you can use, but Hangouts work really well, and they work for absolutely free. So in case of security, you can select the panelists that you want in the webinar, and for integration, you can make sure that you can add your own GetResponse, Aweber, or any other HTML email list, so that anyone who signs up to the webinar is automatically added to the other one as well. The stats part I like the most, and I'll show you a filled-in webinar soon. It gives you all the information about your webinar that you need to know, number of users per time, and exactly how many people were on the call itself. And then finally, the notification. So what we have done in this case is we have built-in notifications within WebinAR X, so you can automatically mail out people when they sign up an hour before webinar, you know, at the start of the webinar, or at any other time, just to remind them. And you can include and exclude lists in here to which you want these notifications to go out. And again, this is to make sure that you can, as and when you want, invite people to this webinar, even if they haven't actually signed up to this webinar before. All you need to do is to make sure your list is already in. So now let me go in and show you stats from another webinar that we were testing out a couple of days ago, just to show you what the filled-in numbers look like inside the dashboard. So let's go into stats, and I'll show you that in a second. Perfect. So as you can see, you can already see some of the questions that were asked, some of the missed questions as well that weren't answered, and also the performance of the panelists on the right. And you also have the webinar invite URL right now, and then you also have the number of users over time. So it shows you how many attendees did you have over time during the webinar, and exactly where the attendees came from. This is very crucial information to have when you're trying to figure out where most of your audience actually come from. So in that sense, we've built this in directly into WebinAR X. Oh, the final thing I want to show you on the front end is actually what the sign up page looks like. We've kept it very neat and clean, very flat. People just have to put the name, email address, and they can automatically then register to the webinar.